right, my name is Kristen Arnold. I'm co-chair of the Warner's Pond Task Force, and I'm calling this meeting to order at 6:03. I'll now take a roll call of all the task force members present. Why don't we start with you, Bill?
Bill Cameza.
Jeff Collins,
Malcolm Bryan,
Sven Muto,
Mark Howell,
Bruce Curls.
Bert Coleman's staff.
Julia Kay? Sitting show stuff.
Toby Berkman, CBI.
Richard Freed, CBI.
Paul.
Paul Baum here.
Anyone else on the?
No.
No? Okay.
And I do know that. Okay. All right, so our main goal for tonight's meeting is to, the dredging group will be making their presentation and on our proposals. And we'll be looking for feedback from the task force. And then we'll be looking at next steps for all of the groups. You can see the agenda on the slide here. And we will open the meeting to public comments in a few minutes as noted on the agenda. And then again at the end of the meeting. The meeting is being recorded and a video link will be posted to the task force website in a few days. So we have two sets of meeting notes. I'd like to approve the September 26, 2024 and October 10, 2024 minutes. Do I have a motion to approve the September 26, 2024 and October 10, 2024 minutes?
I'll make a motion. No, yeah, Vice Chair, maybe I can't. Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the September
September 26th,
26th and October 10th
correct.
meeting minutes.
Thanks.
As drafted.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Great. Any further discussion? Right. Sorry. It was,
Yes.
so all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right,
I think we have to.
Roll call. Okay, Kristen Arrow, aye.
Bill Cameza, aye.
Jeff Collins, aye.
Malcolm Bryan, aye.
Sven Viva, aye.
Mark Howell,
No voting.
aye. Paul.
We're
Sorry.
approving the minutes.
Oh, yeah, Simon, aye.
And Paul?
Aye, yes.
Okay, great. So the minutes are approved as written. Thank you so much. Bill?
Well, as always, we're gonna open it up for public comments, at the beginning of the meeting and at the end. And as always, we ask you to be respectful, avoid personal attacks, and try hard to keep your comments to about 2 minutes, because we do have a busy agenda and we want to get a lot of things done. So, anyone want to make any comments? Oh, yeah. Yes. Yes.
2 minutes to say what's countered. This is a report from 1983.
Get to first identify yourself, even though I know who you are.
That's what I meant, 2 minutes.
That's
Mary
fine, but
Mary
I'll take that
Weinberg,
off.
Mary Weinberg, Hillside Avenue, West Concord, since
All right.
1979. 2 minutes to say West Concord. I held this up last time, 1983, West Concord Center Committee report. In it, on page 13, talks about in the 1600s, mid 1600s, there was a dam and for the settlers, and Nate Smith copied everything and it's online now, which I will give to you you can all find it and the
Good.
pages that pertain to the dam in West Concord.
Great.
These are books that were sitting in our planning department that Ann Forbes did a whole inventory paid by the town back ending in 1995. And unfortunately, Marcia kept it in the closet, and it was supposed to be a Bible for everybody. And if you had known this at the beginning, maybe we wouldn't be here. It talks about the history of West Concord. I will give this all to you.
Good.
I have copies of that. Talks about, again, the dam in the 1700s by Ann Forbes, who is the prominent historian, and she was paid by the town for history.
That's excellent.
This is books that Joanne Lyon gave her love to Warner's Pond, worked with Dan Monahan on the beauty and predicted and how to save it and everything. She died unfortunately in 2009. This disappeared. Dan worked with her. This is books, and hopefully Delia would have more of that. This is, as Mark Twain said, history doesn't repeat itself, but it rhymes. Somehow I feel this is back in the 80s when the train station, everybody said burn it down. And 3 of us worked hard. This is what it looked like before.
Yeah.
The citizens got involved. We won the award for preserving it. It's on the National Register. This is what it looked like. This is what Wisconsin looked like. This
Moving awfully
is-
fast
This
here.
this was Citizens Preserve the Depot. This is the other end of town. We had no history. History, as Dan wrote, was neglected. This was Preserve the Depot, and now I stand here at the other end where we're trying to drain Warner's Pond, and I hope we don't, because that has history. It's the community, which is what we said with the train station. It's West Concord, which is really very important. Yes.
Wow, thank
I
you.
will later, at the end of the meeting, leave this with you all, and hopefully Delia will get more books
Yeah.
for you all. And the planning board very nicely printed up more blue books, which Ann said it was supposed to be, every committee in town was supposed to have these over the years to work from before they started on anything.
Mhm.
So we're catching up.
That's great. Those are excellent. Thank you. Thank you very much. Anyone else? All right, there we are. Anyone online?
Rachel, is that a hand up? Is that?
Yep.
Was it?
No.
No.
Oh, all right.
Back to you, Chris.
Okay, all right, well. Judging group proposal. So we didn't have something else.
This is the third group, small group presentation that we posted, so I think we have a pretty good sense of how to handle these and what our goals are, but we're gonna hear from the judging work group. I know we've all been looking forward to seeing the proposal that you come up with. So I want to suggest as task force members, we want to be helpful to this group, right? Our job is to help them come up with as good a proposals as we can. So listen to what they have to say, think about what you like, right? Offer them that feedback. That's really important for them to hear. Are there suggestions you want to offer that you think would improve their proposal or help you when it comes time to evaluate this, both in terms of how it meets the interests of different stakeholder groups across the town and how it meets all the criteria that we're going to be evaluating these proposals with respect to the individual comprehensive. Okay, so hear what you're saying with those ideas in mind, and be prepared to ask questions, offer feedback. So that's all I have. Chris.
Great.
Unless there's more you want to frame it up, or I can get the slides up.
No, why don't you, just put the slides up?
Great. Okay. Give me a good second.
So, the Warner Pond Task Force, the dredging subgroup consists of Paul Bone, myself, Keith Hannon, Bruce Curlis, Delia Kay, and Jeff Quick. And like the other groups, we've been meeting and trying to put together information on a proposal for dredging.
Lights.
Yeah, if someone tried to get the light.
Okay, so moving on to the next slide. So we have come up with, 3 alternatives. And perfect. The first alternative really is essentially the same alternative that we had, the initial alternative, which is dredging 35,800 cubic yards from the pond. And also, right. So the second alternative is dredging 50,000 cubic yards. So from those 2 primary areas that were initially proposed, as well as an additional quantity, which we would like to connect those 2 areas. And I'll be coming up and pretty soon I'll have a picture so that you can see everything. The third alternative is to dredge 100,000 cubic yards from these 2 primary areas and then additional areas that we would also like to connect. So the base amount that we initially had planned on, plus 2 other quantities. And all the dredged material that will come out of the pond will be dewatered and disposed of at a newly identified location that we have termed the North Field. And this north, so we'll go on to the next page. Now, this North Field, if you look at this, it is south of Route 2 and north of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. So you can see on this picture, it's in pink. That's what we're terming the North Field. You can see where it is in relationship. The orange line is the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, and then you can see Giroux Park is outlined right next to Warner's Pond. So this is really a key difference in from the previous proposal. And that field, North Field, is approximately 10 acres. Okay. Next slide, please. So this is a closer picture of the North Field, and this is with test pit locations. So we had 10 test pit locations were dug. And this showed that there were, there's a nice layer of topsoil, there's some areas of ledge. Some areas had more stones and gravel in it, and there's actually no area of shallow groundwater that was observed at all. And so it's all good upland soil in this area based on these 10 test pits. Next slide, please. And by the way, to my group, please feel free to comment, of course, right? And so this is shows the North Field, same field, and this is showing the topography of it, so the elevation, so you can see that there's highs and lows to this field. But so where it's going from really the cemetery, which looking at this picture, the cemetery is on the right-hand side, and then all the way over to the left-hand side, which is where the access road is for MCI, I presume, to be able to go into the fields and whatnot. And then there's a little cutout area, that's a grouping of trees that we are not going to disturb as well. So it's a fairly good 10-acre field.
Chris, you just might want to mention this parcel is owned by the Department of Corrections.
Yes, thank you, Paul. So this is, oh, right, it's not owned by MCI, so it has nothing to do with bringing it over to MCI or the old MCI. This is totally different. Department of Corrections. Thank you, Paul, for that clarification. Okay, next slide. So you've heard the 3 different proposals, which are essentially the same proposal done just with different quantities. Each of these alternatives include in-pond and out-of-pond disposal. So we're going back to the initial plan, which has approximately a 1-acre wetland shelf in the pond. So that hasn't changed. We're keeping that, and we're just saying, okay, we'll have that 1-acre wetland shelf. We'll dredge 35,000 in one proposal, 50,000 in the second one, 100,000 in the third. So 3 different alternatives. And all the dredge material will be dewatered and disposed of at this North Field area. So there's no trekking it anywhere else, it's staying right within the vicinity. And so that is a key difference from the previous plan. And the other difference is that we're looking at dredging a depth. Instead of, we're initially looking at 9 feet, now we're looking at 12 feet. Actually, we had spoken with a gentleman, his name is Adam Burnett from the Milford Pond Project. He came and spoke to our group. And he is the Milford Pond Project Manager, and they dredged the pond there. And their goal was 10 to 12 feet to dredge. And really, the deeper the pond, the longer it will stay healthy, and you won't have the sunlight, hitting the weeds and the invasives and whatever, causing more rapid growth.
So quick, can I just ask a quick question? When we say the depth of the trees from 9 to 12, it's not like a bathtub, right? It's gonna be a gradual down to 12. Is that how this works? Or how is that actually? How is it not? It's not all gonna be 12 feet, right? Of dredge.
Yes, the edges will be sloped in, but at some point you reach that 12-foot depth, it will be like a pretty large area in the middle of the pond will be
12 foot. Okay.
All right, next slide. Okay, this is really a representation, just to give you a visual of what these three proposed dredge areas would look like. As you can see in the yellow portion, that's the wetland, excuse me, shelf area. That's about the 1 acre area. That's right on Scout Island. That hasn't changed. And then if you look at the two, they almost look like just circles, they're black. Those were the original areas to be dredged. So that would represent the 35,800 cubic yards of dredge. Then if we were to add up to 50,000, then look at that purple portion. And so that would be, that much additional dredge area. So that's what that would represent. And then if we were to dredge 100,000 cubic yards, you would add in that orange area or red area. I mean, so it's not exact, but it's, you know, I think it's a good visual representation to give you a sense of what that amount of dredge looks like. Okay.
Another quick question, do you have any idea about how many acres this all is? What was the original amount of acreage we were not doing the first dredge, do you remember?
It's under 7.
7, okay, so it's at least more than.
Yeah, double,
Yeah.
but this doesn't take into account, going to 12 feet, so this
Oh, yeah,
is
yeah,
just estimating based on the area of 35,000. And, you know, it was just an estimate based on that, as a rough order of magnitude.
Yeah. Good.
So,
Okay. Next slide, please. So we made some assumptions, clearly, right? So we have learned basically the North Field volume with the topsoil removed, because we have to remove the topsoil and put dredge inside there, and then we have to cover it back up with the topsoil. So when that is removed, there is approximately 49,500 cubic yards of space. So that's without doing any further excavating. The construction access and all the erosion control, the equipment, whatever, all that will fit in the North Field. The staging area, topsoil stockpiles, because we have to stockpile that topsoil somewhere so that we can put it back on top of the field. That could be in the field that's south of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail. And another assumption that we've made is that it's not an assumption, we have to have the final grade of the North Field when all is said and done. It has to be below Route 2, below the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail, and below the farm access field road. So in other words, if you're looking at it now, it cannot be up above the any of those areas. We certainly don't want to cause a problem. Okay, and the other thing is that new sediment samples will have to be done for chemical analysis, because it's been a while since the last test was done, so we just need to make sure to do that again. And the belief is that some of it may exceed arsenic criteria and, you know, may require transport somewhere else or whatever, but I think that's up for discussion depending on how much we are going to dredge as to how that will fit in. Okay. And remember, in all of this, there's still gonna be about, like I said, the 1 acre, about I think it's about 4,000 cubic yards that will be used for the wetland shelf area. Next one. So that North Field really could accommodate up to 100,000 cubic yards of the dredge material. This is an assumption that we're making. And that could be true if more of the soil and whatnot was excavated and removed. So we had a meeting or conversation with, Bruce Thompson. And he is from DeMaximus, and he is the, Nuclear Metals Starmet Project Coordinator. And, so they are looking to get about more than 85,000 cubic yards of fill for 2229 Main Street. And he was quite interested in obtaining some of this soil to help him meet his requirements. So if we had to excavate further, that this subsoil from the north field could be excavated and trucked to 2229 Main Street. So that would give us additional material, or additional volume rather, for our dredge material coming from the pond. And I think a pretty critical point in all of this is that StarMet would cover the cost of excavating and trucking this material to 2229 Main. Yes. Okay. Next page. So recreational improvements. So clearly, if the pond is dredged and cleaned up, paddling will be much better. Fishing, ice skating, ice fishing, there's a lot of opportunity to really get out on the pond and enjoy it. With the plan also is to improve the Commonwealth Ave access point, improve the boat launch, have ADA parking, have better defined parking, have a little pullout area so that two cars are able to get by at a particular point. Deal with the stormwater management, remove invasives from there. This Commonwealth Ave improvements, this was all part of the original plan when we did it anyway. So next page. In addition to the Commonwealth Ave point, Pond Street could also have a fishing pier, because that area will be excavated and it will offer an opportunity to put a fishing pier there, as well as Giroux Park, fishing pier and or boat launch per our CPA application that has been put in. So really nice additional improvements. Next page. We're also concerned about taking care of the fish. So we would like to have, it's like a pool or riffle, it's a natural fish lift system. That would just use the natural materials that we have there and river rock and whatnot to create an area for fish to be able to go up into the other part of the pond. By dredging, we'll create deeper and cooler water, and that will help to support migratory fish. And we'll also improve safety by having alternative fishing options. Kids are not just going to fish from the dam. They will have other opportunities. They can go to Giroux, they can go to the Comm, they can go to Pond Street. So there's other areas where they can go that are safer alternatives. And another key point is that there will be access to Scout Island. They won't have to change anything. They'll have a better area at Comm Ave in which to put all their canoes in and safely get over to Scout Island. Next page. And one other thing that we believe is important as well is to reclassify the dam from significant to low hazard. So the SCF factor, the storm duration factor, that would be reduced from a 100-year storm to a 50-year storm. And basically, that means that you're lowering, the design criteria for a flood or storm to withstand. It's capable of dealing with that. And a low hazard is the lowest and safest designation that a dam can have. And the inspection of the dam would be increased really. As it reduced, but it's every 5 years now. It would change to every 10 years. And also under this new characterization, an emergency action plan is not required. It is recommended. We do have one. The last one was developed in April of 2020, so we do have that. And then before we get into questions, we also had some issues that we talked about with the NIPMUC and whatnot, and Bruce, would you like to share?
So one of the things that was brought up was really thinking about that historical connection. And although people in Concord and the history of Concord is as old as it is, ours go thousands of years. And one of the issues, and I was really glad that one of the members had brought it up because it led to a conversation within the tribe with our chief and some of our elders that I had, because I'm the waterways advocate. They always like to throw it back and say, whatever you want to do. I'm like, no. Doesn't work that way. It's community. But one of the points that sort of comes over, and we did only go to the 1800s, like in sort of thinking about that, I do want to point that out, and I'm really interested in seeing how much further it goes back. Because in the 1600s, we were probably still around, so. At least passing through, but we are still here today, so. But one of the pieces is, like impound systems and sort of like in damming. For a lot of the indigenous people, and this is how it was brought up, is the continued colonial injustice. And basically how it was written in our proposal does not specifically address thousands of years of history of the Nipmuc, who fished for eels, alewives, and streams such as the Neshoba Brook. So with that conversation, I replied back, because I was asked to look at it. And this is exactly what I wrote. Although the Nipmuc would rather have rivers and streams return to their natural pathways, we take the approach of working with communities in the process. I'm a non-voting member, so we're working within the process. I'm not voting, so it's a community thing. Most of us do not go to the extent that Concord is going, never mind including us in the conversation. We're grateful to be considered a stakeholder in the shared history. I take the approach of what is feasible, but not always the correct action. The landscape is not that of 200 years ago, never mind 60 years ago. With that in mind, the value of our relatives, the fish and the plant life, and the water will outlive us all. And we have been resilient to all the changes that have come to Warner's Pond. Improvements to fish ladders on the pond and downstream can assist in bringing additional breeding spaces for alewife and herring, which would bring back food sources that the Nipmuc may call upon for survival someday. I guess we always get back to, and this is from my elders council, a simple question. Do we do this because of our need to have it our way, or for the betterment of the community and the earth? And that's how it was left, so that in fact, the way that it was sort of written when we think about historical, really puts it back on the community as a whole. And that we will work with you, because that's just what it is. It's not our way. It's what's best for the water, the fish, the plant life. So really thinking about it in that manner, and that's a lot of what comes back to what my elders pretty much throw at me every time I come at them with something. Is it for ours or the betterment of our community and the earth? So Chris asked me if I would share that with you. That was my response, and that's our Nipmuc response to whatever comes up. Right? Thank you, Bruce.
So I guess at this point, does anyone else have anything they want to add or?
Yeah. Chris,
One thing, we're right now, the dredging subgroup is looking at having a request for information distributed similar to getting the cost estimate for dam removal. We would like to do that for these three options. And as part of that RFI, which we'll be discussing a little bit, maybe later on in this meeting, we're looking at, we're aware that there's a 30-inch drain line that takes stormwater runoff from Route 2 and brings it directly into the pond. And so we're asking the contractor, you need to be aware of this as well as the monitoring wells, and you have to, two things. One, in the proposal, you have to sort of ensure the protection of that outfall. And then we're also taking it a step further and saying, tell us what it would take to develop you know, a kind of a rough design to take that stormwater outfall back onto DOC property and get it out from, you know, we don't really want it, obviously,
No,
in Warriors Pond. So those items are gonna be contemplated for the RFI.
no. Yeah, how long, you know, before we would get back that request for, which is really a request for costs?
Yeah,
How long before we would get that back, do you think, or can we have no way of knowing?
we usually will issue it with a turnaround time of a week.
Oh,
It takes us a few days to go through finance to get the, you know, the thing issued. So it's a couple of weeks.
couple of weeks, okay.
Couple to a few weeks.
Christine, I just want to mention, we're on costs, we certainly don't have the answers yet. That's why we're sending out the RFI. But I think the subgroup is optimistic that the disposal costs, which were a big part of the original bid, will be, you know, significantly reduced because of the access to the north field. And whether we excavate more soil or not, is a relatively low cost option in terms of movement of dredge material from one place to another. So we're keeping our fingers crossed.
Also, let's say, yeah, even if you went back to and I think all three of the proposals are remarkable. You've improved the proposals no matter which way you went, because you've increased the depth and in all of them, you're looking into removing more polluting water from the system. So no matter how I look at this is a remarkably better than you had last time, right? So. That's great.
So anyone else from this group have anything to add before we get to just opening it up? Anyone, Chris, first of all? So the floor is open for all task force members, questions you have, or reactions, what you like, suggestions. And we know that there's been a lot of requests to get permission for an RFI, so people probably want to take a vote on that at some point, right? But why don't we hear from folks first in terms of reactions?
Yeah, we voted on that.
We didn't get approval.
Great, all right, so that's that list, that is right now. So yeah, floor is open.
I just want to say, Craig Terrio,
No,
Sorry, sir, we'll be doing cover the comments at the end.
just want to say thank you, that's all, I was just gonna say, great work, you know, Kevin and Keith and everybody, the task force was put
no, can't
in
do
place
that.
for this reason.
I understand, but really, if you like, you do it, somebody else is gonna do it. So
Oh, yeah.
thank you for saying it, if I get your point, okay?
I thought you said anybody.
No, he means anybody in the committee.
Yeah.
No, just the committee first.
Oh, that's,
All right, no problem. Appreciate this.
I think Malcolm-
So yeah, I see hands, I see Malcolm, and then we'll go to Sven, go ahead, Malcolm.
I guess a couple of things. My first is, what is Starmet's timeline for being able to receive this?
So we asked Starmet that question, and they're not in a rush, they're probably looking like 3 years, but we also asked the question that, hey, if we're ready to dredge and we need to move this, would you be willing to take it? He says, yes, he would.
Okay,
Yeah, so that would not be an issue.
right. And my other was, it may just be my stupidity, but I didn't understand the whole story duration factor. Could you re-explain that? Sorry.
It's not story, it's the storm.
Storm, okay, it said story on there, but even then I don't.
Yeah, that was corrected since you got it, was storm.
Sorry.
I won't give you the story.
But still, I didn't quite
So
follow.
basically what's happening is when you make this change or reclassification, you're going from, like 100-year to a 50-year storm. Let me just grab my note. You're going from, basically you're going from a 100-year storm event to a 50-year one. So basically you're saying the chances of that happening are like 2%. And by lowering the dam from a significant to low hazard dam, basically what that means is that there's not a concern that the dam is going to hold up. to any of these types of events or storms, that it's sufficiently strong enough that it will handle it. And so therefore you can lower the classification of the dam instead of leaving it at a higher one. That's basically what I know
So-
about it.
Does that mean you're only worrying about a 50-year storm? You're no longer worrying about 100-year or?
So there's no need to worry about either, really.
500-year.
No.
It's because the dam is in such good condition.
No, I understand that, but I'm not too sure why. I need to do some background reading up on it myself. rather than bog it.
I think the question is, isn't the 50-year threshold a lower threshold for protecting those things that are downstream than a 100-year threshold would be? So there, I mean, it doesn't really change that eventually a 100-year event is gonna happen. It's whether or not you're making sure the dam is assumed to be ready to deal with that.
Right, so maybe instead of us speculating, this is something that we can come back to the task force with clarity on. But I will remember, just as a reminder, when Joe Gould was here, he spoke about two main issues. One is the dam's likelihood of failure, right, which is, I'm not recalling what the term is for that, but Warner's Pond Dam, as I understand it, is already kind of the lowest risk within that classification. And then the other is, what is the extent of damage in the event that the dam fails? And with respect to that, Warner's Pond is in sort of the middle, somewhat elevated risk category. He shared that it's possible, and maybe even likely, that if it was reevaluated, it would move into the least risk category with respect to what happens if the dam fails. And that's something where we laid out some pros and cons of doing that reclassification. The pro is less need for maintenance or checkups. The con is if you do go after money for dam removal, it makes it harder to get it if you don't have that elevated.
Plus the fact it was proposed in the PAR report.
Exactly.
That
Yeah.
we really should look at, lowering the classification of the pond. We're recommending that.
Also, and I'm not sure I understand how this plays in, but I know it does. There's also the problem of the bridge, which acts itself as a kind of a dam. In a 100-year flood, it's gonna hold water back and not allow it to pass through. And that's a significant issue, regardless of the dam.
Right, whether the dam is there or the dam is not there.
right.
That's still in.
That bridge is
not
gonna
gonna
be there,
change the
right.
flooding aspect.
So I think Sven was next in the queue, then we'll go to Jeff.
So I understand that at a certain point, there would be still sediment measurements and reevaluating the sediment. And the one thing when we do that would be good to include the PFAS levels in that. We know that the water is about double the standards for water and PFAS. So this might have consequences. What is accumulated on PFAS in the sediment, and then what can be done when we take it out and dredge it. Massachusetts doesn't have right now regulation for it, but Maine is doing significant regulations. What can be done with PFAS in the ground, and we have to assume that similar regulations will trickle down to Massachusetts, and that might impact where the hell we can put the stuff, even if we can put it on Northfield. So we have to look at that.
Thanks, Sven. Jeff.
Yeah, so Jeff Quick has said consistently that this Northfield is, should be in the conversation. What agreements do we have, or what does DOC know about this more broadly, both Northfield and cornfields for staging, or what would be necessary to sort of give confidence that this is all feasible?
Well, he's, so as a representative of DOC, he's provided us verbal assurance that DOC would accept the material in conversations about what DOT, and he said DOT, we can as a courtesy notify them, but DOT does not have any ownership of the land, DOC does. But if we were to proceed forward with this, then we would need to enter into some sort of written, agreement with, between the town and GOC.
Yeah, we would do a memorandum of understanding if this transpired for dredging.
Thanks, Jeff. I didn't realize that was you on the call, on the.
Sorry.
Be also just maybe an opportune moment to know if we have Keith here in the room, Liz in the room, and it sounds like Jeff put online, so additional task force members joining. That are joining.
And then so the one other
Oh, go
question.
ahead, Jeff.
And then, I mean, what is the maximum sort of design slope? Underwater slope? Dredging operation.
It's pretty shallow. I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think it can vary, but I don't have an exact number off the top of my head, either, but what was done for the first 35,000 cubic yard project would probably be a really good reference.
Yeah.
We might follow that.
Great question. Yeah, so we'll go Bill and then Mark.
So, last time when we looked at the material, at least I remember in one of the reports, it does talk about there being a little bit of arsenic in one small section of the silt. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder if that could be, or whether you thought about that being built into the shelf rather than having to be taken off site. Well, that's a possibility.
So I'd have to go back. We did look, I believe that we did look at this and DEP wouldn't allow us to use that, even though it was in ponds.
In pond, they won't let you,
That's my recollection. I would have to go
Okay.
back and check that. Yeah. Yeah.
but even if I remember correctly, even though there was arsenic, it wasn't at a high level enough to be considered to be a problem. Was that true?
No, it is, so that there was one, in that, so if you wanna go back, well, it doesn't matter where it is, but there was some samples, in the southeast portion of the ponds that indicated it's called above reportable concentrations, so there are legal limits for how much
Okay.
contamination, and this was slightly above.
Slightly about, okay.
And arsenic it is naturally occurring, but it also was used in orchards,
Right.
and so. There was an orchard upstream of here
Yeah.
that may have contributed.
Yeah.
So there was the assumption that, I forget, 5,000-6,000 yards would have to be disposed of. At a contaminated, a facility that
Sorry.
accepts contaminated materials.
Okay, 5,000 or 6,000.
Yeah, just in that.
Okay, that- Huh? No.
Oh, Renee, yeah, go ahead.
So I'm hoping that the subgroup can help me understand a little bit more of how you arrived at the, sort of three levels, like, are you seeing some quantitative or qualitative differences in outcomes based on that? Like, how did you think about that, and how are we to think about what those options would be? I assume that we would get pricing for all of these, and maybe one of the options or more of the options fits into the monies that are already available, and maybe they don't, but how do we differentiate between those? How did you think about it when you came to those levels, being the right levels to suggest?
So I think I may have proposed those numbers at first, so we really wanted to get like an apples to apples comparison of like a different disposal location with the same dredge amounts for the first project, just do an actual comparison. And then from there, I thought it would be a good round number increase to just get a sense of how much that cost would change with a relatively, small bump. And then 100K was kind of like well, how big could we go? That might help us understand if we go above and below that, how much would the cost kind of change? But it really worked out well when we found out that the holding capacity of that Northfield is about 50,000 cubic yards roughly.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting to have that as a comparison.
But if I can add to that, when the StarMed conversation happened, we realized that we could dispose more theoretically at that area. And the principle, Mark, was the more we could dredge and the more we could open up the pond, the better. But of course, it's limited by cost. So, it's yet to be determined how much we can afford. But I think this sense, the more the better. I think we have a disposal area theoretically for it, but we don't know what the costs are yet, so that's the wild card.
I guess my second question is also something about the logistics is, what are the kind of permitting issues or hurdles or questions that we might need to be prepared to answer? We already had a permit at one point, I guess, for the base project, so but would that process change in any way based on the other two?
So it would change, if the dredge depth increases to 12 feet, then it is a change in footprint, and so it would be securing new permits. And then obviously the other two proposals would also be required permits.
And do we need, I guess my question is more about rationale for the permits and like what does that rationale actually look like?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I
Like,
understand.
is it just water quality or? So,
I think it would be the same that it has been
Yeah.
all along, which is ecological improvements in that convention.
It's been a long process, Julia, to get new permits. How long does it take for us to get these?
So NRC is the fastest, and
Yeah.
but there's two state permits and a federal permit, and it's about a year.
Okay.
Yeah. for permitting.
and I guess maybe to Keith's comment about apples to apples, would we be proposing under the smallest, the 35,800 to still go to 12 feet instead of 9 feet, or is that really gonna be the same?
I think you talked about probably assuming it would be 9 feet, just to really,
Just to make sure that,
but it may not actually matter. I think it's really the quantity that's
Yeah.
the cost driver, so the depth doesn't really matter too much. And so we could assume 12 feet, but it's not even, I don't even think we necessarily call that out in the RFI right now, so.
But you wouldn't be doing that just so in order to use the present permits, you wouldn't be doing that for other reasons. In other words, would you go back to the original, so you don't have to refile for a permit, or would you?
No, I think we have to file on that.
Okay, that's right. Okay, good, no problem.
so is it fair to understand that the scope of work sorry if but I'm really trying to get my head around this. The scope of work for a contractor who was bidding on this is that they're gonna remove a certain quantity and they're gonna get a specification, they're gonna get a slope and a maximum depth, and then they're gonna start in an area and work out at that depth until they've removed the amount that we said. And so the areas that are outlined on the chart that you showed are sort of approximate areas of where that might be sourced from, and we could read them more as start in the, lower middle and work your way around Scout Island until you get to that point. Is that how to think about it in layman's terms? Okay.
Yep.
Good. Thank you.
Great, so some more hands, I think it's on Bill and Malcolm as well. Okay, so.
Speaking about what Mark had just said, correct me if I'm wrong, my assumption had been you're gonna be removing as much of the base silt that you can until you hit what I assume will be gravel. And that might be at different depths depending on where you're removing. Does that sound correct? Because isn't the pond basically gravel basin? Once you get all the silt out of the way?
I think there's a
Yeah.
thick layer of muck,
Muck.
organic matter, and then below that, I think it was determined as mostly sand, we could find
Sand, I should say gravel, I didn't mean gravel, sand.
Yeah.
So essentially, depending on where the sand is gonna be depending on the depth that you go on these various.
You would still remove that
Some
sand.
sand too,
Yeah,
Yeah, the sand gets pumped out,
as well,
that's
okay,
part of the dredge operation, yeah.
oh, okay,
because the goal is to get to that depth so that as sediment starts reaccumulating,
yes.
you don't have, or you have enough depth that the sunlight cannot penetrate to the
Of
ground,
course.
to the bottom of the ground.
That's,
Helpful clarification. Yeah, all right, Malcolm, go ahead.
what would be the impact of the Bruce Freeman Trail of having to schlep all this stuff over it? And, I mean, will there have to be permits or anything? I don't even know who owns that land, it's
So it's-
probably us.
No, we have a 99-year lease from the state, and, as I understand it, we would need to clarify this. Once, that section of the Bruce Freeman is open and, maintenance and everything is the town's responsibility. I don't, we'd have to check with I don't know, with the state, whether it's the OTC, to find out whether, anything would be necessary in terms of permitting from them. But it would basically be, a pipe going across, a flexible pipe, taking the pumped dredge material, and then another pipe bringing
The water back.
the water back into the pond.
Will that be disruptive to like bicycles?
Yeah, I
Well, to
Would
a
think
point,
it is.
you can have
Yeah.
just ramps, they use these ramps so you can drive over them pretty easily, so
Fair
it wouldn't be much of a barrier.
For some reason, I was thinking of these giant pipes,
I-
like sewer pipes, but it's probably not.
In an earlier presentation material that was sent around, there was almost like a sky pump.
Yeah.
Hose bridge, but that wouldn't be.
Yeah, that's like side cast, so that's just the same technology without pumping it through a pipe, that was just like getting up and then pushing it over to the immediate area to the adjacent. So that, it's the same basic technology, but instead of letting it just shoot out right next to the dredge, you just force it to go. And they can run these pipes literally miles, it's pretty wild.
What's the diameter?
Probably varies based on the pumping rate, so. That's a pretty short distance, so hopefully they can just use the cheapest. Pipe option.
Okay, looking around, let me just name maybe for you all, right, to keep it top of mind, I think the kinds of things we're hearing, right? So I think a bunch of this is just maybe like little pointers that and things you could clarify, just to kind of head off questions, and I think you can, seems like they're straightforward answers to all of them, you can think about how you might want to draft your proposal, so things like, just specifying the timeline of the start, that sounds like it's flexible, right? So that's kind of clarified the proposal. Thinking about, how do you want to handle the feedback issue, right? To ensure that we don't run into roadblocks down the road if there are new regulations. I think if we have this kind of point about dam classification, maybe just making sure we're kind of specific on the benefits of that. There's a kind of asking for clarity around, we have verbal assurance from DOC, right? What would it look like to actually get that confirmed, right? How sure are we, right? What's the process for that? There are some, questions of clarity or about clarity around the slope, right? Is that the same for as it was in the initial proposal? That was, way back 10 years ago. Then I think an interesting request from Mark around, you were asked about how we came up with these 3 levels, and we're gonna get cost estimates on them. I think you all correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe I'm reading too much of what you're saying, Mark, but it might be nice to hear from you all, like, what do you, beyond just sort of what we can see on the map in the different areas, what do you think we get from these different sizes? And do you have a sense based on the cost of where you think the sweet spot might be, right? Like, oh, if we open up this area, it kind of will have these different impacts, and it'll make it better in this way, right? Maybe add a little more color to that, right? I could imagine it'd be helpful for the group. We've also heard about this arsenic question, right? Clarity on the permitting, and clarity on the impact, especially the risk of the retro. So that's, I think, we could like.
One more,
Yeah.
I'd add one more is, I think, a little more about what Bruce has talked about in terms of the tribal interests and how they use different options to tie back into, making those as well. I don't know, I didn't read. I don't know, it's already written up.
Yeah.
But I think that's important in terms of cultural and historical.
It's in there. Okay. But it seems like these are, just a lot of clarification issues from both, right? I think generally it seems like around the room, people think I see that, they all think something together, that, it's gonna be, what this group are doing. So, are there other missing pieces? Yeah, Simon, go ahead.
Yeah, just looking at the map, I think is what would be good to understand what the continuous kind of work against invasive species is on the non-dredged areas. And you dredge in a certain area, so we can, when you go deep, so we can assume there's some control there. But the vast majority of the pond is probably still taken over by invasive species. So how do you handle that? How's the maintenance? How do you deal with that?
Well, that's a pond maintenance issue, that's not really like a dredging related issue, so we're not really looking.
Yeah,
into
but
that.
it will be interesting when you compare the scenarios. When suddenly you have, let's say, another scenario where you don't have invasive water species anymore for the area, and here you continue to have it.
Yeah, I think that'll be addressed. There's no methods to deal with invasives, but we could actually, in theory, dredge more than 100,000 cubic yards. We just don't know yet.
But then I think it should be done on the records to say, it's okay, this is the area that is invasive free, and the remaining area of X acres continues to have invasive species.
Some of it are nuisance, it's not that much of a distinction, but it's more nuisance species than invasives. For example, that whole back of Scout Island, towards the western end, right? Most of that is water lily. So just to be aware, they're not invasive, they're just overwhelming.
That's true.
So, I mean, I'm just curious, Ben, I think there's an interesting question on the table. We do have a work group that's looking at sort of ongoing management without any major issues. I think there's maybe an assumption that the areas that aren't dredged would still require that ongoing work. Is there more that any of these work groups need to do to kind of clarify how that looks different, right, under a dredging scenario, beyond just the area of work is smaller, right? Because there's more deep water area. It's a question for the group, right? I'm not sure if that's kind of what you're asking.
No, I'm more like this.
Yeah.
Again, when you come to the point, at a certain point, you will have to get together and look at the three main scenarios and compare. Say, are we able to compare? What are elements we are forgetting? What is ongoing maintenance under the different scenarios? And are we able to compare apples with apples, or are we doing apples, oranges, and citrus fruits?
Right. So as we describe this option or this alternative, whatever it is for evaluation, I think being clear on sort of what it is, right, and what it would look like, which would include ongoing management, right, in these areas.
Yeah.
I think Bruce,
Yeah.
So one of the things that our group did talk about at the end of our last meeting was the idea that there are parts that are surfacing within the other proposals, and this is us as a group, when we're looking at it, may be able to answer all of the questions within our individual proposals, and what really comes forward is potentially a hybrid of piecing parts from one to the other to come up with a larger proposal that's made up of different pieces of the overall proposal. And I think that, when you brought up, like, think about every scenario, there's no way to think about every scenario. And I think we're all trying to come up with as many proposals as we can and thinking about it. But it's like, obviously, there is the need for ongoing, the maintenance piece and all of these other parts of it. And that when you're thinking about, yes, there's a dollar amount that we're looking at sort of to get to the general health of Warner's Pond, whichever way, the task force decides. But at the other side of it is, how do you keep it going? And that's a dedication in a different manner that has to be made sure that people understand that as well. when it's moving forward. Because, you know, you can look at the, you know, the world from 10,000 feet, but what really happens is 20 feet in front of you. So it's really kind of making sure that we're looking at both of those pieces as it's going forward. And I think that we started having that discussion, but we didn't want to get away from really the focus of looking at the amount of dredge, looking at where it can be, looking how we're gonna do it, really sort of trying to maintain our focus that answers the questions that were put forward by us as a group that goes back to that original document, and can we answer them? And this is what we came up to answer them. And now I think we need to go back and tweak them a little bit to answer the other questions that are surfacing, but I think we shouldn't take off the table the idea that there may be another piece, and that what sort of the no action group or that created a lot of work. There's a lot of no action. But the reality is there's gotta be parts and parcels of that. I think no matter what happens, it has to be engaged in that and pieced in.
So picking up on that point, I think it
Right,
would be
we had Liz in the queue as well.
Oh.
Go ahead though.
so useful to clarify or specify. The two things that I noticed were the natural fish passage and the reclassification of the dam. And I'm wondering whether there are any particular like beneficial synergies to attempting those things alongside of dredging. Or are they really able to be thought of and pulled out and maybe incorporated into somebody, you know, into another proposal like the management plan proposal. So I think it'd be really useful. I definitely get that if you have deeper, cooler water on the other side of the dam, then, you know, there's obviously a benefit to creating a fish passage that gets fish there. Because it's more, you know, better habitat for them, but other than that, like from a construction perspective or an engineering perspective, are there any synergies to doing that alongside of the dredging project, or is it just another add-on to the dredging project?
I gotta say, Mark, I don't see it as an add-on. I mean, I think that was a significant thing that we were concerned about.
Yeah.
Many of us in the very beginning.
Sure.
And I think regardless of the groups, we've all been thinking that some sort of fish passage would be significant for us. And that's, so I think it makes sense that they would have it in theirs, and that we've had it in the, our no action, short-term action group as well.
Yeah. Understood.
Yeah, follow on that, follow up comment, Mark.
No, that, I agree with them.
And I think just from a like process perspective, I think the idea of combining or taking things from one proposal, borrowing them and including that in, you know, even if it's not the final thing that we recommend, we should do that.
Yeah.
For sure. That's one of the reasons why we're having you come up with these things.
And if you hear from something in more than one group, you begin to believe this is really significant, you know, for us.
Liz, you're awesome.
Yeah, Liz, were you still in the queue or did you?
Yeah, for the natural fish passage concept, it'd be good to have that equally sort of fleshed out, investigated in terms of cost and feasibility and suitability for the species we're looking to benefit. Given the slope we have there and existing.
Right.
Is this an add-on to existing stuff, building up the block?
Yeah, exactly.
Is that something you'd like to see from these work groups, like kind of level of investigation?
At some point, we're going to evaluate these
Yeah.
rounded out proposals against each other. And maybe there's more written detail to the group that presented today, but yeah, was presented as a nice to have, but without sort of an engineering
Right.
description.
Right. I mean, I'd be curious in putting this to the group because I think it is one important question. I think we've heard that these can really vary in their effectiveness. We have the person visited via the Friends of Warner Pond and the letter that came out of that. Right. I know it's an open question, but is there some more clarity that we can or should get on kind of how much space should we have and if fish ladder being effective, and we can learn more about what it would take.
I mean, there's an opportunity to put it in the RFI, because it hasn't gone out yet. So if everyone agrees, we could lump it in with general just because of the timing, I mean, sorry, with dredging, just because of the timing. But that's just an idea.
I would be open to that. My question, would it throw askew your, RFI? To have that
It
included?
would just be like a line item.
A line item?
No, I don't think it would affect the
Okay,
other costs.
Yeah.
That's why I mentioned it.
But I think we need to be more specific to sort of that shallow that we talked about.
yeah.
Just to really sort of like put that slide and how that's gonna look. At least so that they can give us a fair number. Cause you know, you put out over a fish ladder to come back with a,
Right.
you know, a $10 million fish ladder. It's like, no.
There's
Yes,
there's other, like, other, you know, build
Right.
systems which might be more efficient to just provide that,
Agreed.
give them the elevations. We
Agreed.
have the elevations there, we just need to fit this and those
Right.
elevations, maybe.
So we may wanna look at what that is. What that is.
If we have some analogs or other examples or the standards and that have been shown to accommodate what we're trying to accommodate here, then, and they can work with that.
If you have ideas for what would be effective.
But I'm happy to
Yeah.
help you some research.
That'd be interesting to know, because you're talking more of a fish passage than a ladder, if you're thinking that way at all.
Yeah, the way it was described, we talked about rock ramps.
riffles,
riffle structures. But can that be retrofitted to what we have there, or is that
Yeah. It's good.
Yeah,
a dam removal and rebuild, you know, like, I don't know.
Yeah, my question in the back of my mind is when, you know, raising it, is there some sort of synergy because you've got certain types of equipment involved in drilling the dredging project, or you maybe have a source of boulders that can become part of the rocks, or whatever that is. If there's a reason to do them together, then I think it makes sense to add it, you know, put it in as an option along with that project. But if it really truly is sort of standalone and it doesn't matter whether that's the only thing you're doing or whether you're doing it alongside dredging, then I think everybody's interested in it. I think we just need to recognize that it can be bolted onto, you know, either of the the proposals that we're working on that retain the dam, essentially.
So it sounds like there's a suggestion it would be helpful to get some more expert opinion on the cost of this. Right?
So as part of their,
Right.
request for information.
Yeah, is that right? Or-
Yeah, I guess,
Yeah.
you know, if there's any thought that there might be a benefit to doing the two things together, then I think it's worth pursuing them together. If there, you know, there's reason to believe that it's just a whole second thing that doesn't benefit from being designed at the same time, then doesn't matter what we do.
Maybe that's a question to ask
Yeah.
in the RFI, like, would this cost be different if we weren't doing the rest of the project?
Well, it's gonna be a line item,
Yeah.
so it's gonna be a line item, you can always remove it.
I think Mark could get into, is there that like synergistic benefit that would reduce that cost because they're doing a big project already, right? Where you're doing this standalone and be different. Right? Yeah, Malcolm?
I think doing that has the advantage of enabling us to compare apples to apples again. Because clearly dam removal creates fish passage. And one of our criteria
Yeah.
relates to fish passage. So it seems that a baseline for all options ought to be that we can meet that. So it would help to know.
Yeah.
I have a question, on this discussion of the fish passage. Are you, in talking about putting a line item in the RFI, are you asking for a line item to evaluate the cost of fish passage, or are you asking for a line item to evaluate what type of fish passage would be appropriate in this location?
We'd have to provide a specification and ask for a cost.
So you would need a cost to provide the specification as well?
No, we would, the subgroup would have to decide what that, fish passage would look like. And then that gets added into the RFI, to say construction of this specific fish passage between these elevations in this location.
And Billy, who would you talk to get that kind of yeah, what, you're doing an engineer, who does that?
What
The cost, I mean, the design of a fish passage. Yes.
Brad Chase. Well, I'm not sure if he designs them, but he would certainly know what the different options
This is an
are.
example, this is on NOAA's website, this is just a natural.
Yeah, that's,
Just a tiered system with simple pieces using rocks.
yeah, so how do we get that design? This is, I think, your question, how do we get that design? You
I
need cost?
think the state, I mean, the state does these. I think Brad Chase would be the person.
Okay.
To ask.
Okay, good.
So it sounds like there's a request for this group to maybe connect with.
Right, put it in,
And figure out how to best put this as a line item in the RFI.
yeah,
Is that right? Okay. So we're at about the time that we're intending to move on from this group. I think we've gotten all some good feedback. If you have anything else you want to raise, before we move on, or anyone else have any other topics you want to bring to the dredging group?
I just want to say, I thought they did a great job. I was really impressed with what they've done and the way that they were able to make it so concise and have certain uniformity, even over the three different elaborations. And yeah, I think it's fascinating to see what happens with this. But I think the big issue is going to be money. So let's see what we find out about the money. That's always about the money.
Right, so let's give another round of applause, but you want. So we're gonna move on to our next agenda. Maybe just want to get a little stretch and energize yourself. I know there's a couple people flagging, so feel free to stand up. Certainly like that be helpful. I know I need it, so.
Difference between checking and figuring out.
So just take a minute.
We are. We check in and report out.
Okay.
This is, I think this is the right agenda.
Let's get back to it.
Boy, that was
great.
Yeah.
Yeah. We wanted to, so let me just check into the group and, Coach Garrett, feel free to chime in on this as well. We thought it might be helpful to give work groups a chance to check in, with some small group meetings. It's on the agenda. We also just want to name, we have, at the end, scheduled for 8 o'clock, task force member topics of interest. We also have the proposal that Malcolm and Liz came out with, and I think we want to make sure that we have time for them to look at that and get some feedback on. We don't expect that we're gonna take a vote on that today, although who knows, right? But at least if they have a chance to share that, and we can give it kind of a robust attention it deserves. So I name that just because we budgeted a half hour for this. We have 25 minutes for that conversation at the end, which probably will include some other discussion topics like our timeline, right? Thinking about public meeting, kind of getting cost estimates so we can be planning. So anyway, we don't want to keep you here too late. So anyway, I was suggesting, we were going to suggest maybe like a little bit of a shorter check-in, just because I think we do need to touch base on a couple of issues. We'll go from that. So suggestion, maybe 15 minutes of small group, just a chance to check in, then we'll come back, hear back from the groups. And then move on to the final topic. Does that seem reasonable to folks?
Sure. We have to do separate computers and all that again?
We do, unfortunately, yeah. So Rachel and I have a computer, but we could also just leave one of the groups in the main room with me out, right? So why don't we do that, since Bert, you're the, the short-term action or no action group. Why don't you stay here in the main room with the owl, okay? I can go with the I guess the equity group, you want to put Rachel, I'll go with the judging group, Rachel's gonna take I'll do the judging, Rachel will take the removal. So I'm making sure these breakouts right now.
I've
Okay,
done it.
you did, okay,
Yeah.
great. So Julie's gonna open the breakout, okay, and we don't need anyone to go into the no action. group. Okay, because they're gonna stay and make it. Okay.
Well, actually, there's no move, if it makes sense.
But if you want to, that's the public, if you don't mind, and you want to do, breakout, please do, okay, and no action, we'll be in the main room.
dam removal's gonna be across the hall, thing.
Okay, we want to open the breakouts.
Yeah.
Sammy, do you have a subgroup assignment? Are you?
Well, I had a little one of the very first one.
Yeah.
For them removals.
Oh,
That's
okay.
why I'm just joining it back.
Oh, well, we'll include you on our.
Yeah, I was on the first one. But I don't get it.
Sure, sorry.
And I wasn't sure because from the town, so I'm not sure if I was supposed to be.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I don't know if I went. I did not get assigned to a work group. To a breakout. Celia?
So we met, last week, and we've gone through. a few versions.
I mean, I just have my computer here, but I'm not in a room,
That was sent to you.
you know, my meeting room message.
Oh, for,
Sort of amenities, trails.
so you should have a breakouts thing.
Go here.
Breakout room.
Oh, it's in, I was looking for a message.
removal.
Okay.
Okay, I'm just checking with those of you who are here online. If you want to join a breakout room, so it looks like all of these small group conversations are occurring in a breakout. Okay, there's a little symbol at the bottom of your toolbar that says breakout rooms. So if you click on that symbol, it should open up the possibility to move to these rooms. Okay, so if you want to join any of these small group conversations, you can do that. If you're having trouble and you want me to help you with that, you can unmute and I will go ahead and assign you and move you into one of those breakout rooms. Okay, so if you want to be moved into a breakout room and you're having trouble and you're with us, go ahead and speak up now. Otherwise, I'm going to go to the breakout room and you'll lose your chance. Okay. So,
Could you put me, Tracy Dunn, in the dam removal group?
yes, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anyone else want to be moved? Let me know. Okay. Now's your chance if you want to be moved. Okay. I'm going to join the dredging group so that they can have a laptop.
Yeah, it's okay. We shut the thing. It's out the huge fog and everything involved before we went away. I'll give you yes.
They're blinking, but it's big.
This one's blinking.
And it's Steve like that,
Yeah.
some tests.
So you, oh, you don't have that, but I.
I think if you just pull this one. That's all. the rest of it.
Right.
Yeah.
And this way.
Yeah, we should, and, you know, and, Cliff is in our group, and she's got a, she's doing this group now, and she's adding. This doesn't be gross. To our, we figured no matter what we do coming out of the transport, we should have that. All right, you're right. Starting.
Excuse me, I mean, much as though I appreciate being given an.
I take it.
I just want the case, I like the case.
Report out from each of the groups, as we always do. Is there a group that would like to go? Give us all an update.
Sure. So. For the no action management plan, we have some new information that came in a couple of days ago that we should distribute to the whole committee, but basically. We had asked EA to give us a preliminary assessment of the drawdown capabilities of the dam. And to just cut to the chase, it's pretty readable. But the lower elevation of the sluiceway is 15 feet, which means that in theory, you might be able to get the pond down 3.5 feet, but actually the calculations of flow rate suggests that even with the low level pipe and all the boards removed, we would get barely enough flow to expect that the pond would drop about half a foot. And that would, you know, and it might even not do that in some of the winter conditions, because that combined flow rate is about 120 cubic feet per second. And that the average flow rate in the wintertime is about 121 cubic feet per second into the pond. So even if we opened up the thing, what would happen is the water would stop going over the spillway, it would go through the sluice, and that's what it would do. So
Badly designed.
it's designed probably for maintaining the spillway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Not for drawing.
Not for drawdown. So that's a little disappointing. We'll process that into our report, but, you know, generally, you know, doing a lot, it doesn't seem like from an engineering perspective, that's gonna be a very profitable option for us. Other than that, we're also, Ann Clifford, who's not here tonight, is currently working our proposal to add some of the historical context and the timeline pieces to it, and I think we all saw the sort of republished timeline in our meeting materials, and so that's kind of what we're up to in our group. We'll sort of process this new information and decide what to do with it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Next group.
Why don't you guys go? I mean,
Sure, dam removal, we met last week, we've been working on our proposal, which is in good shape, we've got a few other things to do. We have a next meeting scheduled for November 11th, which we do know is Veterans Day, where it's really the only day we can all make it, so Malcolm's in communication with someone from the town clerk's office. I'm in communication with someone from this building to make sure we can pull that off, and that's above board. And we're
looking forward, if it works out with agendas, to present at our next meeting.
So you'd be
And
ready to present.
you were trying to get some numbers on, Janet.
Great.
Yeah, we're working on some budget information. We would love, actually, Mark, we'll just talk with you guys to help you remind us where you got that flow information. So we had some questions about stream flow data throughout the year.
Yeah, it's in the report that we'll put out, right?
Yeah, they reference some stream stats from 2008, 2009.
Okay, that would be really.
There was in there, so, yeah, we can just send that.
Unless anyone else says something.
So even though the dredge group already gave you the presentation, is there anything you want to add?
Just that we talked about the RFI in our meeting now, and we will add in, the riffle, some sort of fish assets, the shoreline item for that. And, yeah, we expect to send it out by Monday.
And we also talked about, the relocating the 30-inch drain entirely onto DOC property, and we felt that because that would take away so much volume of ability to put dredge in that fields, that we were instead going to ask, or suggest that the short-term action group ask DOT to put in an oil and gas separator instead.
What? What's that? Yeah, no, I didn't get that at all.
Okay, so I had said at the
Yeah.
larger presentation that we were gonna ask for cost for, rough design.
Yes,
To relocate that 30-inch drain that goes into Warner's Pond.
yes, I got that part.
Onto the other side of the Bruce Freeman Rail Trail,
Okay,
entirely onto DOC property.
right.
And the group talked about it when we just met, and we said, that's gonna mean that all that volume of a pond essentially
Yeah,
is going to take away a whole lot of volume that would be available for dredged material. So we
yeah,
don't want to ask for
Okay.
that. We're going to instead suggest that the short-term action group
yes,
ask DOT
yes,
in your proposal
yes,
to install an oil and gas separator, which is a stormwater management feature
okay,
that is probably not on that pipe because it's so old.
okay. Got it. All of a sudden, oil and gas separator. Where did that come? Yeah. All right, got it,
A deep song as well.
Yeah.
got it, okay.
So that would answer your question.
Yes. Yep. Thank you.
Yeah, cleaner flow.
Okay.
So, right, keep some touch.
Anything else that anybody wants to add or ask of another group? It's nice to see some trading going on.
What was trading, Zach? I guess I.
You have the longest list anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, sorry. Yeah, yeah.
Okay, all right, thanks. Turning back to Toby.
Great, okay, so moving on to our next, and final, please, task force meeting topic of the day, member topic of interest and next steps. So,
Good thing.
all right, so we have a couple of items we wanted to talk about today, and then also leave it open to the group. We just want to share, we got some, a handful of survey responses, and those suggest that folks feel like we're making good progress, and working well with the group, and the meetings are becoming, very productive. So it's great to hear, and to be all for all of the work that's happening behind the scenes, connected to me, and you're all bringing connected as well. We wanted to give Malcolm and Liz some space to share their draft research design questionnaire. We think it might be useful to check in again on our timeline. I think you've already heard from the dam removal group that they are interested in presenting at the next meeting, which we, I think, have had official presentations from all our groups, and just be kind of waiting on cost data for you all to finalize the proposal. So be interesting to see if we have an estimate when we think that information will come in, and therefore when we might be ready for a public workshop, when we might be ready to think about evaluating these options and criteria. So I think we should have that conversation. But let me just check in, are there any other items of interest anyone wanted to add to this list? All right, well, Malcolm and Liz, Lord, you are.
Okay, it's
So I think
elected.
maybe a little reframing of this. I think let's treat this like, you know, an initial idea proposal. I don't think we're gonna probably have time to vote on this today, but I think we want to give Malcolm and Liz some feedback.
Are you saying we didn't get sufficient clarity that everybody can see what we mean immediately?
Right, I'm just getting this in out this morning. Right? So we'll hear what's in it, and, you know, I think immediate reactions are great, you know, constructive feedback to them on how to improve this. And I think we don't need to decide today, right? Maybe if we want to do this, or such the guidelines around this, but let's hear from you all, and you know, we can support them.
Okay, so I will speak on our behalf. If you recall last meeting, I expressed an interest in getting a broader input from the citizenry of Concord. Because I feel that a lot of what we're getting right now is limited to people who are specifically interested in this topic. But there is a large, I mean, there's 14,000 voters in Concord, and we don't have 14,000 people coming into our meetings every time. So it would be really nice to get a sense of, are there issues that other people in Concord have about Warner's Pond? Even somebody raised that how many people even know anything about Warner's Pond? And somebody else said, well, even if they do, they don't really care. So it would be nice to get some answers to that and actually know what people think and feel, and use that to guide our actions in both whatever option we ultimately choose, and how to educate people in the town about what so there are implications for what we collect. And my goal in this was to do something that is sound, so that we're not just getting information that doesn't really mean anything, but is simple and you know, to the point. So we put together, you know, the background and everything isn't that important. I will correct the fact that we're talking about Walden Pond. We are, oh, that's right, I'll correct. We are actually talking about Warner's Pond, not Walden Pond. And so the objectives of this study meets along the line. Well, first of all, we want to do a simple knowledge, attitudes, and practices study, slightly modified for the topic, but a straightforward CAP study that will, first of all, inform us, as I said, about the broader view and what we might need to do if when we come up with a particular idea, leading to understanding how much awareness is there in Concord in general. We know that in West Concord, there's a lot of interest, but in the rest of Concord, what sort of interest is there? How much do people outside of West Concord use the pond? And do people have any knowledge of the fact that there's actually a decision to be made here about the pond? So that's the overall arching of whatever. And the specific questions for me are, well, for us, because we did these jointly. When I say me, I mean Liz and me. So are the citizens aware of the ponds in town even? And essentially, do they have, what percentage of Concord actually uses the recreational, water recreational resources we have. Is it everybody? Is it a tiny percentage? And what percentage of those people who do use the water resources use Warner's Pond as opposed to one of the others? Are people aware of the fact that Warner's Pond is dealing with eutrophication, it's filling in and it has invasives? Do they actually have an opinion on the options that we are looking at? And to what extent does cost factor into their thinking? So we came up with two overall hypotheses. And remember, hypotheses are simply questions to be proven or not proven. So the first hypothesis is that Concord citizens who live outside of West Concord are unaware of what's happening at Warner's Pond. I hope that's not true, and I hope we will disprove that. But I mean, it's a hypothesis. And the second is when people are informed about Warner's Pond, the majority of Concord citizens don't really care. We can turn that around if you like, if you're uncomfortable with that. But either way, all we're trying to do is to prove that or disprove it. Because those seem to be the two main things we're looking at with this.
Malcolm, you want just comments or?
Yeah.
Rather?
Oh, please.
I'm a little, the second one, it seems a little harsher than I think. When informed about Warner's Pond, the majority of Concord citizens do not care about its future. Maybe it's changed it too much, but I wonder whether the real thing might be, or they have no opinion about the pond rather than not care. In other words, I just haven't thought about it one way or another, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't, they don't care about it. It just isn't one of the things that they think about.
I'm very happy to change that. Is everybody else okay with that?
And there's a reading comment from a different point of view.
Not yet, not yet, man, not yet. You have to wait a little. Make a
Let's
minute.
take on the 2 minutes.
Uh-oh.
Wait.
I think the, I think similar to when we were setting our criteria and we needed them to be directional. You know, that we want it, you know, up to be good or whatever. In this type of a test, you need to test one extreme. And if it's whether people don't feel strongly about it, or people feel strongly, they could feel strongly in opposite directions, right? That's not really what we're testing for. We're testing for which extreme folks are closer to.
Yeah, overall, I would be happier. Rather than say have no opinion, I would rather have a null that says, if it feels as though it's too harsh to say they don't care, I would be happier saying the majority of citizens care strongly about its future, rather than that, because that's something that's easy to prove or disprove. Saying they have no opinion is bland.
Depends on what you try to get at it.
It's also mid-range, and in any kind of survey, mid-ranges have no opinion. Because you have no opinion one way or the other, and I think you were trying to get to an extreme on either side. And I think that one of the things that, let's not get caught too tied up in, it's a hypothesis.
Yes.
It's not.
You could rephrase it to say, when informed about Warner's Pond, the majority of Concord citizens don't find or do find Warner's Pond important. Something along those lines.
They do not feel strongly.
Don't find it important. I think that's the extreme.
I think find it.
Yeah, maybe.
So-
I'll take that wording if everybody else agrees.
Well, they're not seeing this anyway, right? This is a hypothesis.
No, they don't see.
This is our discussion.
Okay,
They don't see any.
okay, yeah, right, okay.
In that. this is a public meeting, yes.
No, I know, but I mean, in terms of the actual survey, when you're
Yeah.
standing to somebody, you don't say you don't care about one.
Yeah.
Or I'm trying to see whether you care at all about Warner's Pond. You're not doing it that way.
So a couple of just reflections I want to leave with you all, and you can share any kind of feedback you want on this. I think one thing maybe to keep in mind, let's think about how to make this as useful to each of you, right, in making your evaluation decisions, right? So we have criteria that are involved. We also are thinking about how this is serving the interest of members of the town. So what questions would give you answers that might actually influence our decision making, right? I think is an important thing to have to think about. And then the second thing is I want to encourage us, I think wordsmithing, probably needs to happen. We can do that. So I found sometimes it's not always the best use of the group's time to kind of get super narrow on these questions in the room. So just some suggestions on how to think about feedback. Helpful possible. With that in mind, yeah, go.
So thinking about the 3 ponds that you called out, and they are the top of mind ponds, so I think that makes sense. It occurs to me that Walden Pond has a long-standing state-run recreational facility that's been there for a very long time that people kind of understand. White Pond had a private facility which became a town-operated facility a few years ago, so it's got a little bit of history. And Warner's Pond has the Giroux Recreation Area, which is, arguably barely open. And so I think that it might be useful to think if we're going to survey to mention these recreational areas, and because I think attitudes towards these bodies of water is also connected to the attitudes or awareness of the recreational opportunities that are there. And I think that we probably have a relative of the 3 that I just mentioned, probably the lowest awareness one is the Warner Pond area, which is coming. So, in terms of whether or not there's something to test there or to understand, it might be useful to understand the attitudes around it.
I think we will. I'm not too sure that we can determine causality in something as simple as this.
Yeah.
We can determine whether people use it or not. But I think it would be a real stretch to then go into detail as to, well, do you use it because there's, so such and such a period, there's so many facilities and this and that. And I'm not too sure that that's going to inform anyone, but I may be wrong on that.
I think quick follow-up, I just want to understand the interest behind your question or suggestion. Is it that you think that you want to learn basically if there were more investment in recreation, would that matter to people or would they be more invested? Is that the motivation behind it?
Yeah.
Interest in improvements?
I think that, to the extent that we're looking at the involvement with these bodies of water from people that don't sort of immediately abut them and sort of see them in their backyard every day, it's probably through the facilities that they can access, they can drive to. And so we have a public facility on each of these bodies of water that has a certain level of availability. And so if we're trying to understand whether people have an awareness of it, whether they feel some loss if it wasn't available, or feel strongly about keeping it or increasing access or decreasing access, asking about the White Pond Beach, asking about the Walden State Facility, or asking about Giroux Park, kind of is a different way of asking about that body of water. And, names matter to people. They may not be aware that much of Warner's Pond, but they may be aware of Giroux Recreation Facility. So if we're trying to understand people's awareness and engagement, it might make sense to use the other name for these things to understand Because they may not make that connection if you just ask them about the pond.
Right, I think that's great, that's clear.
Well,
Yeah, Rich, go ahead.
and to get into it, so it's like, you have I'm going through the questions, I'm trying to jump ahead a little bit. So in question one, you have all the ponds listed, yes, no, and after a prompt. So maybe that prompt is where that happens.
Yeah.
Thinking about that prompt of, oh, Jerome, oh. And I think that might be one of the beach, Park Beach, I think that, it's like, how do they feel? So it's like, no, after a prompt, yes, and maybe it's a way of sort of circling one, checking one, so that that the prompt is what drove them to understand which one was. But that, that's just sort of more of getting to really understanding. Because it's the same thing, it's kind of interesting because, going back years and thinking all the times, that I even rode the train into Concord and never thought of Warner's Pond or knew that it was there.
Right, yeah.
And it's kind of an interesting thing. And then it was, much later.
Yeah.
That I found out about that.
Yeah, that reminds me, like I said, I wondered, whether it really is a good comparison with Walden, Warners and Whites. And whether I'd move more quickly away from Walden and White Pond. The reason is Walden, I may be wrong if this is my hypothesis, is not used as much by the town as it is by outsiders.
All the time.
I understand this too. I'm astonished when I go over there. It's overwhelmingly people from all over the place who are over at the pond.
Oh, it's true. All over the
And
country.
From all over the country, that's, and parking is tight, et cetera, et cetera. So I wouldn't, it's almost like those questions, it's okay, you can leave it there, but they're almost like the deflections, like what you really are interested in is Warner's Pond. And so I would just, I wouldn't spend a heck of a lot of, maybe you are spending a lot of time, but I would move on quickly to,
That was certainly the intent,
that's what I thought, yeah, okay.
because the focus is Warner's.
It's
Pond,
Warner's Pond, absolutely.
but trying to, well,
Tease out.
the thinking was how many people actually engage in any form of water recreation? Where do people get their water recreation desires met currently? And by raising awareness of Warner's Pond, would we be able to draw some of those people to Warner?
Okay,
That was my thinking.
that makes sense, that makes sense, okay.
I wonder,
Sorry, go ahead, Liz. Yeah.
sorry, I wonder if at that point, if you move on to question two, we kind of narrow it down to the three to get that narrative, but I wonder if now, after hearing that, kind of like, I wonder if it's worth saying sort of like Walden, Warner, White, if the big ones are like, and then a generic, every other cat, the people who do their stuff at Kennedy, cat, people who do their stuff in the homes. And not any of the things, so it's sort of some of the things we were talking about, where it's like some people, like, if you live near Kennedy Pond, you're probably not going anywhere else, like.
Yeah.
So maybe you have a line that says like, other conference. And I think that, Bill, I don't know if that would catch a little bit of what you're saying.
Yeah, maybe I was being overreaching too, I don't know, Liz, I'm trying to wonder, I don't know. I mean, you might, yeah, you could. I don't want to overthink it on my end, I mean, you guys do a lot of the work, so.
Can I ask a question? Sorry, I don't want to interrupt, but I wanna, make sure I'm feeling a little, I'm just a little confused about sort of I think there's a lot, I think the study has a lot of it, it's.
Yeah.
Right? I just want to make sure that I understand and we all understand. The question of awareness of Warner's Pond. How does that, learning about that, help us fulfill our mandate, right? Or make a decision among the alternatives that we're thinking about, right? I think you named it would help us think about a strategy for getting people to be more aware of it, right? Which is one thing, but would it help us make a decision about which alternative is so have? I understand there's other pieces of the survey that get other
I'm
questions.
not 100% sure that it would, that piece of information would necessarily influence the decision we made. But as I said before, this is going to go to town meeting. And if we need to understand if we've got a major article at town meeting about Warner's Pond, it feels important to know what our job is in terms of reaching out to people and who we need to reach out to in a general sense. Because obviously this is not identifying individuals.
Yes, sorry. I think we should just clarify, I mean, maybe, I hope I don't have this wrong, but it isn't actually guaranteed to go to town meeting at this point.
No, not at all. But the intention is that it would go to town
just to
meeting. Is it
clarify.
not? I mean, it's,
If there's a major action, then yes, if you go to town meeting.
yeah, I mean, if, what we, I don't know, if we're just sort of sitting tight and, you know, the short-term action, maybe that doesn't need to go to town meeting, but if we're dredging or if we're removing the dam, both of those do.
Dredging does not require town meeting.
Sure.
Dredging does not require town
No.
meeting, only if you're gonna try to raise more CPA funds.
Oh, there you go.
So, but nevertheless, town meeting or not, I think it's always good to get a sense of how our stakeholders or constituents.
So I think,
Here.
Go ahead, yeah.
so I think what it is it's how do you educate people about what's being put in front of them? Yeah, I mean, it's really kind of simple. It's really like, you're the stakeholders. I mean, I'm looking, you know, I've kind of already read through this and I'm looking at it, it's like, I'm not sure the numbers enough to really get a broad enough sample based on that you had 251 people that did the electronic survey and only 95 proposed here.
Yeah,
I think I think it's not apples.
well, that survey was,
Apples, better term. Electronic sent out, I get.
yeah, and I adjusted some of the assumptions in terms of, you know, where are we here? In terms of the sample size. So, you know, I estimated a fairly high margin of error.
Right.
Simply because I'm not too sure how many people we're going to get collecting data. And if I end up being the only person doing it, yeah, 100 people is a hell of a lot.
And the piece of, I think the other piece that sort of jumps out at me is, so you're doing it in 4 very strategic areas of town.
Yes, and they may not be the right area.
And one of the other pieces of that is need to identify in those areas of town where people are from, because we're trying to get feedback from people from 4 very
Yes.
distinct areas of town. And you could be in downtown and you know, 30 respondents could be from West Concord.
Exactly, yeah.
So I mean, it's really got to be able to, you know, put that in. It's really interesting because I'm looking at this as sort of as if it was a human study. You have to go through a review process of all of it. This is what we're doing, basically. We're doing the review process of, can this study give us, without harm, the information that is probably the easiest way to look at it. And it's really just sort of statistically thinking about that. Because I think the questions are well done. And I think that for the most part, it's a hypothesis that's well done. But when we sort of like get into wordsmithing or breaking it down, it's really looking at raw data and then figuring out what of that raw data is it that we think will be a benefit for us as a whole. And we're really looking at what's the raw data as a benefit for whole. And I think that's what you're getting to as well. It's like, how does it inform what we do? It doesn't really inform our decision-making, but it does inform how we educate if we have something that's going to be proposed and put out there, of how we make sure that all of the voters are educated in what's been put forward from the task force. And really sort of simplifying it so everybody understands it. And I think this can do that, because we'll have a level of understanding of what people know and don't know.
And you are quite right that I had intended to add, after Liz and I last met, a lead-off question that says, do you live in West Concord or Concord in general? Because we do.
People distinguish.
We do need to be, that will be self-identifying as to where they live, and I don't think that will take us to a point where we have anything that would identify an individual person.
Question to the group, how do we want to, move this forward and get kind of feedback, if there's additional wordsmithing, suggestions that people want to prompt for, how do we want to do that? So that, I guess, Malcolm, or you imagine, Malcolm and Liz, excuse me, Malcolm, you guys wanting to come back with a more specific proposal for the next meeting, so that what do people think? I mean, do we do online feedback? Or we could certainly include questions on this in a survey, if that's what's needed for public meeting, and then share that. And the next meeting.
People can respond, you know, so as long as it's less than a forum.
Yeah.
People can respond with comments directly to Malcolm and Liz.
Okay.
That would be helpful.
Yeah, that'd be
So, if for no other reason, I'd like to perhaps get approval to do this, or
Yeah,
have you all shoot it down and say we can't do it, that's fine. But, I'd like to be doing it before I'm doing it with Blizzard.
Good thinking, yeah.
Before we end here, this is question 7, it's a leading question about, do you have concerns about your taxes going up? Yeah, I think that needs to be really carefully considered. Maybe we should focus on that now, but I'm not aware of any solution where we're gonna make taxes going up, so we need to be careful there.
I wondered about that too, and I wonder whether, now this may not get to what you're wondering, but if you ask them the question, look, something like, these options have cost repercussions. The most expensive, we believe, would be dredging. The least expensive would be no action. How would you prioritize these three possibilities? No action, knowing that one's the most expensive, knowing that one's least expensive. You know, put them in order for us.
So my thinking around this, if I can explain, is that we heard from FinCom at the last town meeting that our real estate taxes are going to be rising at 7.9% a year for the next 5 years. They also gave us a very nice document that identified, you know, how many hundreds of dollars our taxes go up that every $1 million that we borrow or overspend. And when I came onto this as this task force as an at-large committee member, I said that my intention was to represent people in this town on a fixed income who already are struggling with the slightest raise in their tax rate. And that's why I'm interested in this specific thing. If we come up with a proposal that, you know, means that if we can do everything within the money that Delia has, then it's irrelevant. But if we come up with a proposal that one is within and one requires spending $1 million, $2 million, pick your number above, is that going to influence how people feel about it? Given that I know, because of what we were told by FinCom, my taxes are going to go up by 50% in the next 5 years. That is starting to become a hardship for me on a fixed income. So yeah, I do care about the extra $1 million or whatever. Nobody here may feel the same, in which case I'm really happy to get something that reflects the task force's opinion.
I think that I agree with Keith that it is a bit misleading, and yes, you're making an assumption that we are going to come up with a proposal that could increase taxes. I think it's up to us to come up with a proposal that will not increase taxes. I mean, we know we have money available, and I think we're all aware of that, and I think we're all aware of trying not to overspend. And I just think that as soon as you ask this question, I think most people are gonna say, no action. And no action is kind of misleading here as well, because it's not no action.
No, I know
It's,
that.
so it's, you're,
Yeah.
it's kind of like forcing you into a decision that's probably, I don't know if that's really what you're looking for.
No, I'm not trying to get a biased opinion. My thought was that depending on how people respond, we either feel as though as a task force, maybe we cut off some of the bells and whistles and something so that we come under, and don't put the taxes up, or if everybody says that doesn't really matter, then that does influence how we choose as well. But if the question is leading, then obviously it needs
I
reading.
feel that it is, from my perspective.
So I think this is a really important conversation. I think that getting this question right, it seems important. So I think I want to encourage those of you who are kind of squirrely about this question, like think about what could you offer Malcolm as a phrasing of this, as you not bias. So we get at the interest of understanding how much this cost matters and in what ways, right? So think about food for thought for comprehensive comments.
And Liz, let's just say, Liz and I have already worked on this to try to get the wording right, and so anything people can add will help.
So spend energy to come back to that.
Yeah, just, want to, and I don't know, challenge or put the question generally out there, no answer for tonight, but I think, I would challenge the statement, we have the money anyway. I think
So we
there's,
have so much.
for me, is the one thing is there's opportunity cost. If the money is not spent, or whatever dollar is not spent, can be potentially used somewhere else or for other purposes. This is not because the money is there, it can be spent. I think we have to think a little bit different to that, given all the whole tax situation and the spendings in the town in general. If the question is, do you spend $3 million or not? Yeah, we have to open our mind to say potentially if we don't spend 3 million or not, or only 2 out of the 3, we don't have to spend the money just because it was approved at a certain time. You can always come under, and then you have the opportunity to spend potentially a similar budget with other priorities somewhere else. Just keep that in mind when you're saying we have the money. I think we don't have the money. Second, and we don't need to have answers, we're just going down. Second, I would also challenge the point is the statement we heard, we don't need to go back to town meeting for dredging. Town meeting questions and articles, are voted at a certain time, but we got significant additional information around the dredging scenario or any other scenario. And we're talking about significant dollars. And I could see a case to say is, it is better to get a reconfirmation from the broader public, even if it is the same amount or even if it is with the same limits, because the general public got significant more information about scenarios, options, and costs. Just that it was voted a few years ago doesn't mean that you cannot go back and reopen this thing. And I would encourage to think the long way, because not this influences the broader population in Concord. And it would be better housekeeping to go back, even if the dredging is within the $3 million. It's just no answers now, but I think that we have to consider that.
And I think that it's, if you look at 7, it's like, it's as simple as, it's not just about top taxes. If the cost goes up, the cost goes up. And you change your mind if the costs were going to increase. You don't have to say taxes, it's still gonna be a cost increase, and I think everybody knows that if you have a cost increase on a project, it's gonna be an increase somewhere, somebody's gonna pick up that burden. So I think it's just a way of, I think it's a wordsmithing issue.
So I think on page 5, there's multiple references to no action, and what that means, I think that needs to be updated.
Yeah, no, absolutely, that was a shorthand, I know it needs to be. I don't know what the actual proposal is from the no action, but it's still called the no action. So if somebody could give me the right word.
It was originally called, yeah, we cut it short as it was kind of amusing, but it's called short-term action, yeah, intermediate, short-term intermediate actions.
Short-term and immediate,
Intermediate, I think.
intermediate.
I think that's what it is, yeah.
It's in our notes somewhere.
And another.
Yeah, it's in our notes.
Posted too.
Another minor comment you have listed under, question number 3B, 2022 town meeting. So how did you hear about what you just described?
Yes,
And you have 2022 town meeting? I don't understand.
well, that's when the money was voted.
2022?
It was actually, well, there were three, I think it was over 3 years, and 2022 was the last.
That was the
year.
last one,
Yeah.
all right.
I can provide you.
So should we just say town meeting?
Yeah,
You got it wrong. Town meeting articles, vote.
That's easy. I attended all those meetings, but I don't remember voting for one.
Within that CPC.
Everybody's going back.
Yes, whatever it's long.
Yeah,
or capital, I mean, it was both capital and CPO funds.
yeah.
So, I don't wanna cut short the conversation, I'm also just trying to look around and set energy. But how do we feel about, at this point, sharing some written comments to Liz and Malcolm? And
Sure.
those can be as specific as you want. And if you all come back to us, we'll provide over the next meeting.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you all. So last topic, we wanna just touch base a little bit about, and think about what's coming up. So we want to do a public workshop, as we've been talking about, and we had talked as a group that we should have concrete proposals that include cost data at the time we do that, right? So we've been getting ideas and proposals from each work group. We'll hear again from the removal work group at the next meeting. You all are going to put out an RFI for costs for the dredging group, right? So that's all coming. I'm just curious, do we, kind of, with all that said, when can we anticipate when we think that is going to all be kind of intact such that we could do the workshop? Could it be the workshop be in December? Are we confident, or what do you all think?
I think you have to wait a little longer personally. I don't think we're there yet. I think you think differently.
I'm a little concerned that now we're sending it out, it takes weeks, we're in the middle of November.
I think if we're already concerned, it's not me, it's like it's a generally busy time. I don't think there's any breach, there's something to be concerned about that.
Okay, so then we're probably thinking January.
Yeah, I think it makes more sense.
Okay,
And
then
people are invited to these meetings anyway, if they're, they're interested in being here.
But it does become much more difficult for people in December because of
Yeah, holiday.
holidays and parties. Is that what, I couldn't hear.
This is a busier time.
Oh.
I was like.
I couldn't hear you, that was.
So, great, I think I think where we're headed. I also think if it's January, we don't need to think immediately now about getting a new group together to design that. Right, so great. Any other items on folks' minds, topics of interest? We all agree, we want to hear from the dam removal group at the next meeting. Okay, great, so we'll look forward to that. In terms of next steps, so next meeting is November 13th, 6 p.m. I believe it's McKay Road, is that correct?
I think so.
Yeah, we'll have to confirm that. We'll once again send out a feedback form. You all feel free to send feedback to Liz and Malcolm on their proposal. I know I'd love to see that feedback as well, but you don't have to include other members of the planning team, but yeah.
Could I just ask that people provide it within the next week?
Sure.
Because if you leave it later than that, then we're back in the situation where this isn't going to get to you until the day before, and so the
Great.
sooner you
Yeah.
can provide feedback, the sooner we can
Yeah.
do it.
Should we try to pick a deadline, a date,
So.
pick a date? A week from today?
I'm wondering,
Yeah, next Tuesday. It'll be an auspicious day.
Nothing else to look at.
Let's say.
We're all gonna be putting on TVs.
You will, I think we're gonna.
All the groups are TVs.
Why don't we say the fourth?
all right. I just want, could this be loaded to Google Drive so we can all just submit comments to the same thing?
I don't think we're allowed to, is that, I don't know, this is a question for Bert and Amelia. Can we use Google? I agree, it's very helpful.
I think it's best to just send comments directly to the authors.
I can just open meeting law questions.
Oh, open meeting law?
Yeah.
Our individual between 1, 2,
Yeah.
3 is not quorum.
Yeah.
I don't realize that was, sure. Gotcha.
I know. Wouldn't it be easier? You know, all right, so I'm gonna get back with your public comment.
Bill?
Okay, so here we are. It's time for public comment, and you all know the rules. And keep it within 2 minutes because we're all getting tired. So any public comments? Yes.
Hi, thank you for this evening. I'm Cynthia Cass. I live on Plymouth Street here in West Concord. And I have a couple quick comments and then a question. My first comment is pursuant to the question that you were just talking about the survey. I think that when surveys are only on the town website, they probably don't get much action. And also, if you drive around Concord Center, you probably have seen that huge sign right by the high school on that side of that house. Please save Warner's Pond. So there are people around town who know about it. I also want to comment on a comment that was made during your discussion toward the end. Thanks for that, thanks for the presentation on, that was made tonight. But the quote was made, and I believe I can attribute it to Malcolm. Quote, dam removal obviously creates fish passage. And I don't know that that is going to necessarily be true when you talk about water levels. So I just want to throw that out there. When you talk about how much the pond is going to go down, if the dam is removed, especially in dry times, anybody who's walked by the back of Neshoba Brook Bakery and has looked at the water this low, you need to look at the data of what that's going to mean. And then my last question, and you started to deal with it when you said that you're going to do the public workshop in January. The next meeting is dam removal. Can you talk about what the decision-making process going forward is going to be and what's the schedule for that?
You two want to take that? Anything?
Do we want to respond? I mean,
We really haven't decided yet. And at some point, we're going to make a recommendation from this committee. It goes to the Natural Resources Commission. So I can tell you that. That's about as far as I think you can go at the moment.
I would just say, you can reference some of the earlier meetings at the beginning when we laid out criteria and approach for how we got the options we consider. For that stuff.
So can I, knowing how warrant articles are presented prior to town meeting, since you're talking about having a public workshop in January, and you're talking about timeline, it sounds like that there's not going to be a warrant article for town meeting for this year.
Not likely.
The town meeting is later too,
Oh, that's right.
whether that's relevant. or not.
Yeah, so we're not pressed to make it this time. Make it for this town meeting.
I want to do it right.
Yeah, Mary?
The group will stand out, it's up to the planning board to put it online. So I'll speak to Elizabeth Hughes. As I said, they've been in the closet for all these years. And I put the numbers of the pages that I thought pertain to one is found on the front, so you can see. And I can get more for the committee. This one, Joanne Loring worked with Jen Monahan for years with her love, and I believe Delia, if you hopefully you can get more of these. And Mark said that I was with Nate last week, and he put this in PDF online.
Yeah.
But these are, Delia, will we be able to get more?
Yeah.
Of these, okay, so if people want to see the love that Joanne put it in, and then I didn't know this was gonna happen, but I'm listening to, I don't know you, Malcolm, but will you? I don't wanna, I hate to say this, but are you from West Concord?
Yeah.
Okay, do you remember in the eighties when what this looked like? And do you remember when we didn't have any zoning bylaws and all the things, and people, we had big meetings and people were saying they never, we're second-class citizens, and screaming, and Bob Carter and everybody, and then Steve Schaefer said, we're gonna get zoning laws, we're gonna, and then we got the park, and then the planning board committee said, when we talked about the importance of the depot, when all the things were, this is important. And one of the planning board chair said they should burn the station down. And everybody said it's an eyesore and the town won't like this to it. And this is what happened after years of working. And now, like you mentioned, the train station, everybody takes it for granted. That was because West Concord is important. And there was a pride from that train station. And if you Google West Concord Depot opening celebration 1989, you will see everybody there celebrating it, and the lieutenant governor, the senator, the head of the MBTA, and everybody came out. You will see, and Nancy Beecher explained what that meant that night for West Concord. So and I've learned this from the beginning, when nobody on the other side of town except David Little, Nancy Beecher, and a few people thought that West Concord was important to Carol Dwyer. So it's what's sad is that they're all dead, or they're moved away, or they don't remember anything. But there was a love for West Concord, and sadly, our planning department did not continue that information to everybody because you wouldn't have to ask the town, but the truth is, it's still the same, Malcolm. It's still the same. I already asked a few people, and I mean, I love Henry Dane, but you know what he said to me? That's not important, Mary. It's just a belief. I mean, he says the cell phone tower is important. The real estate tax is important. It's the same old, but I was at a selectmen's meeting about a year ago. One gentleman said, it was a hearing, and he said they were complaining about something in Concord Center. He says, well, I hear that now West Concord is the it place.
Hey, Mary, we shouldn't be.
Okay.
Just
Okay, so, but you understand
Yeah.
that.
I fully
Take the
understand.
survey.
I fully
Okay.
understand.
So, and then this, I'm gonna give it to your chair, that you can, Nate Smith, put this on to Google this. I'm gonna give this, everybody can see this report with page 13 that talks about one is called the history of West Concord. So I'm sorry I get emotional because there was so much effort to say that West Concord's important, but it wasn't from the other side of town.
Mary, that's enough. Thank you.
Anybody online? Anybody else?
Yes, that's it.
Okay, all right, well, without any further ado, the public meeting has come to an end at 8:39.